Hello, everybody, and welcome to Win Championship Traits for Life, a show focused on strengthening the mental fitness of athletes, coaches, and anyone and everyone that works with a team at any level. I'm Lee Elias, that's JB Spizo, and we are joined today by Randy Grimes. Randy is a Baylor University graduate where he was also an All-American and an award-winning 10-year veteran of the NFL as a center for the Tampa Bay Bucks. While his NFL career is accomplished, I'm sure he'll tell us today in this episode that his greatest challenge was acknowledging and treating an opioid addiction that developed while treating several career-related injuries. His pathway and story of recovery is nothing short of inspiring and incredible. Today, Randy is a professional speaker who redefines what it means to be an addict and tackles challenging topics such as substance use and disorders, pain management, mental health, suicide prevention, trauma, addiction in the workplace, access to treatment, and more. Randy is also the creator of the nonprofit organization Pro Athletes in Recovery, whose goal it is to help athletes who suffer from addiction, traumatic brain injuries, depression, or other health-related issues. Randy, this is going to be one of our more important shows today, and I know we're going to have fun while we talk about these serious issues. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to be here. What a great opportunity.
Oh, we're grateful to have you. And as I said in the pre-show, Randy, we've been looking forward to this episode for a long time. Your message is insanely important and your story is very inspiring. And I know the audience is going to take a lot from it today. So
I hope so. I hope so. You know, if I don't get anything else across today, I want everybody to know that it's okay to not be okay. But it's not okay to not ask for help. You know, it happens to the best of us. And, you know, it affects everybody. Every family in America is affected somewhere by mental health or addiction issues.
Absolutely, Randy. And look, that's why we're here. That's why this show exists. And again, we talked again in the pre-show is that the whole point of this show is to not ask the same question every time about the same moment. It's really to dive into the really important questions that are going to help athletes, coaches, and really people in general. This isn't just, just about athletics, right? This is about the human experience. So Randy, before we jump into your life after football, let's talk about your life in the sport as an athlete. How'd you get involved with the game? What made you love the game? And how did athletics help to shape you into the person that you are today?
Well, you know, I was born and raised right outside of Dallas in Tyler, Texas, the rose capital of the world. You know, that's where Earl's from. He was a Tyler Rose. I was probably the Tyler Thorn. I don't know. But, you know, football wasn't religion in my house, but it was a close second. And, you know, my dad he worked for the parole board. He worked for probation. He was a probation officer. And, you know, football was his love, though. I can still remember him buying me Vince Lombardi books, you know, and making me read them or making me watch the Cowboys play or having me out in the backyard throwing or doing some kind of drills, even as a young kid. And, you know, he always coached my teams going through elementary and middle school. And, you know, he missed his calling as a coach. You know, that's what he probably should have been. That's what he was so great at. I still have guys that are my age that I played with back then that still remember some of the things that he taught them. But, you know, everything was centered around football. I had an older brother who was also very good at football, and football just kind of came easy for me, you know. Yeah, it wasn't something I had to really try hard for. It was just natural. I had a great high school career. I was able to go anywhere in what was then the Southwest Conference. Now it's the Big 12.
Right.
I was able to go anywhere I wanted to there. I chose Baylor. I wanted to play for Grant Taft. I had a sister there, and it was just kind of the natural thing to do. So, you know, going to Baylor and playing for Coach Taft, I learned a lot about goal setting. I learned that maybe I could turn this game that I would have gladly played for free. Maybe I could have turned it into an occupation. You know, I started seeing the other scouts coming around, looking at Mike Singletary, you know, looking at some of the great players, Walter Abercrombie, some of the great players that we had at Baylor.
Wow.
You know, and it dawned on me that, you know, hey, you know, if I can really up my game, then maybe I could be part of that process too. So, again, football just came easy for me. I had a great college career. I was able to be drafted in the second round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 45th player selected in '83, and the second center behind Remington. So, things were really going good back then.
Randy, I'll tell you this just as a fan of football. Now my entire life has been spent in ice hockey. I'd say it's about 95% ice hockey. And,
that's on frozen water, right?
Right. Sometimes. Yeah. Most of the time,
Yeah.
if you do it right, it's frozen. Right. But
y'all don't play on grass. You play on frozen water. Okay.
No, if we play hockey on grass, we call it lacrosse. But one thing I'll tell you about football, I had the privilege of coaching some high school football, and I just fell in love with the sport. Now, JB is a leadership expert. I'm a team building expert. And what I loved about football was the teams within teams within teams, and the symphony that it takes for everyone to be on the same page every play. I was enamored by it. So, well, again, I say hockey's my profession. Football's one of my loves. I really enjoy the game. And again, thank you for sharing that part of your story, because it is a wonderful game when it's played correctly. Now, Randy, we often asked our guests about a time they had to face adversity and overcome it. And the story you're going to tell today is one of the most impactful and important versions of that we've heard from an athlete. And I actually said to you in the pre-show that your story is out there, but I did not want to take the step up to actually read that in our open, because I think it's a story that you tell incredibly well and with a lot of impact. So could you walk our audience through your journey back from addiction?
Well, let me talk first. Let me tell a quick story about my first adversity
sure.
in professional sports. And that was my rookie year at Texas Stadium. Having only played center in my life, I've never played guard before. Our left guard miraculously pulls a hamstring during pregame. And so my first start in the pros was against Randy White at left guard, a position I had never played before. And I had to grow up a lot that day. I did grow up a lot that day. I can still remember him asking me to quit calling him sir. Every time he would pick me up or something, he would ask me to quit calling him sir. But the very next year, we played in the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio. So as a team, we get off the bus to go tour the Hall of Fame as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I walk around this room and we walk in, and there's this 10 foot by 10 foot mural on the wall. And every year sports writers would submit their pictures and stuff to the Hall of Fame, and they would select one and put it in there. And there's a picture of me, actually of Randy White, reaching over me. My helmet's all turned. I'm looking through my ear hole. My legs are all crumpled. He's reaching over me, about to grab Jack Thompson. And I had to live with that the rest of my career, that humiliation. But
yeah, be happy there weren't cell phones back then with cameras on.
Yeah, you're right. But, I was that guy that was willing to do whatever I had to stay out on the field. I can remember the first conversation I had when I got to the locker room at One Buck Place there in Tampa was with Leroy Selman. And, the first thing I learned about football was that it wasn't a game anymore. It was now a job. And the second thing I learned from Leroy was you do whatever you have to stay out on the field. And, you don't want to get that reputation as being always in the training room, always on the injury report, always waiting in line to see the doctor, always missing practice. Because once you got that reputation, you were never going to get rid of it, and what was sure to be a short NFL career. So, we played in an era back then, and I know you remember this well, where the mentality was if you didn't practice well, then you weren't going to play well. So we literally just beat the crap out of each other all week long. That was the mentality. If you don't practice well, you're not going to play well. And, we would just hope that there was enough left in the tank on Sunday to play. And, it was kind of that junction boy mentality is what I call it, kind of that old Bear Bryant. And, because a lot of that's where that came from. And so what did doing whatever I had to stay on the field look like for me was taking handfuls of pain pills every day to practice through the nagging injuries and the different issues that I was having. And then handfuls of sleeping pills at night just to get to sleep through the throbbing pain. And, I justified it so easy because first of all, I'm getting it from the team doctors, so it must be okay. Or I'm getting it from the team trainers, they're handing it to me. So, it must be accepted, or our teammates are giving it to me, or I've got fans right outside the door who will get anything I want for them, Those are ways that I justified it because, I wanted to be the best center that ever played the game. I wanted to play the game forever. I wanted to be all pro. I wanted that next big fat contract. I didn't want anybody else in my position because there was always 2 or 3 guys behind me just waiting. And so I was not going to let that happen. So, what I was calling a necessary evil was really a full-blown addiction is what it developed to. And, not once did anybody ever come up to me and say, Randy, why are you slurring your words? Or Randy, why are you nodding off in meetings? Or Randy, why are you late to practice every day? Or Randy, why are you the last to leave the building every night and pills are missing out of the drug safe? We had a drug safe in the middle of our training room that was full of narcotics, and it was never locked. If you didn't get it from the doctors or the trainers, then you could just go get it yourself. And if it was ever accidentally locked, we had 3 white guys that started on defense that entire decade that I was there, and their jersey numbers were the combination to that drug safe. So that was the mentality back then, that it was off-label prescribing. It was do whatever you have to stay out on the field. And, I'm guilty of putting pressure on myself to stay out there. Doctors are guilty of pushing guys out there probably a little sooner than they are because they have a lot of pressure on them from owners and coaches. And, that's the way the game was played back then.
Randy, what an incredible story. And, you're definitely a hero and a trailblazer for doing this. I worked in professional sports, hockey players though. And you just said so many things there. Number one, we have a lot of young players come in and now it's a profession. So, you got to think about it as a profession. And unlike football, hockey, we have a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-olds coming in and now getting a contract, not really sure what to do, and living the life. And oh, by the way, you have to take this seriously. You have to put on a collared shirt, you have to put on some pants, and you have to come there. In hockey, we just lost a player, Jimmy Hayes. He was 31. And he had cocaine and fentanyl in his system. And I applaud, God rest his soul. He was an amazing human being. We had him in Florida when I was there. Just an amazing young man. Did anything we ever asked him to do, on and off the ice. And I applaud his family coming out and saying that, like, maybe we can give him help. And what you said is, look for help. It's not weak. I had a long military career in special operations, and we were the same ways. We didn't ask for help. Because you didn't want to get out of the lineup because there was other people behind you ready to take your spot to go do these missions. So I think it's so important that people understand and hear your story. And my question is can you just speak about, being a professional athlete? It's a 365 cycle. There's no more, preseason, off season. Maybe there was for a bit, but there's not much of that. I know in hockey, would start training camp like September 15th, and then 2 days later would have a preseason game. So there's really, you got to come into camp in shape, ready to go. And I think sometimes, the general public misses that it is a 365 endeavor. And maybe you can just speak about that.
Well, and I'll start by saying what you were talking about first, the mentality of athletes or really any first responders, anybody in that uniform, it's, we were raised by our fathers, and it's not their fault because that's the way they were raised, but we were raised by our fathers to suffer in silence, that big boys don't cry mentality where you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back in the huddle. That's the way we were raised. And that's where all that pressure starts, is that again, I'm not going to let anybody get in my position, but that's the message that I want to get across to these young athletes, is that it's okay to not be okay. This is a different day and time. At least we're talking more about mental health issues. We're talking about substance abuse. I know last night I was at an event where we were talking about statistics and all the people that have passed away as a result of opioid overdoses. And, I'm thinking to myself, buried deep in those stats, you know, you have the Tyler Skaggs, you have the Vincent Jacksons, just recently we've had two former first round draft picks from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Vincent Jackson and Keith McCants, pass away as a result of substance abuse disorder. So, we have all these great names, and so many families are affected deep in these stats, or names and loved ones that are gone as a result of this. So, you've got to put your hand up and ask for help. But, back when I played, yeah, it was, if you weren't going to the playoffs, you'd play your last game and you'd clean your locker out, and you wouldn't come back till mini camp started in the spring again. But in between there, you had to stay in top shape, especially if you're playing in a place like Tampa, Florida, where the heat is always, baking on you. The work is so physical. When you've got a coach like Ray Perkins, who brings in 3-a-days in the middle of 110-degree heat, I wonder sometimes if I could have played longer than 10 years. And I don't think I could have, just because of the way we practiced during that decade. And, those 3-a-days for 4 years didn't help anything. That's for sure. Shortened a lot of careers.
Well, good thing of the, collective bargaining agreement now,
Yeah.
And on all sports that, give players at least a little bit of that. I was talking to an equipment manager, and he's been in the league for hockey for like 30 years. And he was talking about the old New Jersey Devil days of they would have 3 practices a day, that the gear was so wet, it couldn't even dry. And the players are just putting wet gear back on to go back out on the ice. So at least, we're making some progress in there.
We are making some progress, and it's because of advocates like you and the work that we do, and especially the way narcotics are being dispensed now in the NFL. I think that we've made a lot of headway in the last 12 years, and there's a lot more accountability and structure involved in how they do that. So that's one thing I'm proud of over the last 12 years.
Randy, 2 things I want to note with what you just said about, what your father's kind of taught. And again, when you look at the era you played in, your father's probably a World War II time period, or before. Look, that generation had to live through some incredible adversity. So as you said, it's not surprising the kind of suffer in silence mentality. But one of the things that I realize as I get older too is that, we follow our family patterns, and family patterns are not always the right thing to follow. Broadly, right? Some of them are very good. Some of them, a hard day's work, or, understanding how to put the effort out,
Sure.
they're very good, but some of them can be really detrimental. So the next question I want to ask you, it's off script a little bit, but I realized it's an important question to ask you specifically, talking about questions that don't get asked that often. When I was 16, 17, 18, rising the ranks, there's nobody in the world that could have told me that the pain I was playing through and the things I was doing weren't going to be worth it. You know what I mean? It's very hard to tell a teenager that what the future may bring. And I never, ever, ever like to tell an aspiring athlete not to follow their dreams, right? They have a right to pursue their dreams. But the question that kind of comes to my mind is not, was it worth it? Was your career worth it? Right. But it's more or less, what is that message to the teenage kid or the college football player about to go into the NFL, or the dreams about playing in the NFL? Because the question would be asked a lot of you, like, would you do it again the same way? And I never thought that's a fair question. That's not how life works. Hindsight's 2020, right? But what is your advice for that aspiring athlete, to, I don't want to say avoid adversity, but to be aware of maybe what you went through and your passing of the torch to them, so that maybe they have a different path?
People ask me all the time if I would do it all over again, knowing what I know now, and the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I love the game that much. Obviously, I would change some things. There's a lot of people that I hurt that I would like to not hurt the next time around. But I guess this is where I feel like I went wrong. I allowed football to become who I was instead of just something that I was good at. I allowed that to be my whole identity. The 10 years that I was in Tampa, we were a revolving door of players, coaches, front office people, GMs. I had 5 head coaches in 10 years. I had 6 different offensive line coaches in 10 years. Couple different general managers, and maybe I probably had 10 different quarterbacks get up under me. The one consistent thing about the Bucs in the 80s and early 90s was Randy Grimes at center. I seemed to survive every one of those changes. But I remember after the 92 season, and like I said, we after the season, you would clean out your locker, you would have an exit meeting with your coach, you would watch the film from the day before, and then you would go wherever you're going to go until minicamp started up again. But I remember standing at my locker after the 92 season, and I'd been hurt that year some. And I remember feeling somebody walk by. The exit to our locker room was right next to my locker. And I was standing at my locker looking at it. I felt somebody walk behind me. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I heard the words, "Randy, your services won't be needed in Tampa anymore." And as I turned to look, all I could see was Sam Weish hitting that silver bar in the middle of that exit door and walking out. And I remember thinking, wow, that's how it ends? All the blood, sweat, and tears that I've left on football fields all over this country since 4th grade. And that's how it ends. And the reason I say that is because I already had this raging dumpster fire of an addiction going. Now, the fact that you're taking away my uniform, you're taking away my playbook, you're taking away my itinerary that I read every day, you're taking away my identity. And that was just throwing gas on an already raging fire. And I struggled for a long time because I allowed football to become my identity. It was my sense of self-worth. It was my everything. And when I didn't have that uniform anymore, I struggled. And I hope it's possible to do. I hope that if I ever was reincarnated as Randy Grimes, a football player again, that I would never allow football to become who I was. It would just be something that I was good at. And I think kids are getting better at that now. There's still a lot of pressure to do well, and parents put a lot of pressure on them, and outside forces put a lot of pressure on people to excel, but you can't let it become who you are.
Right. I'll follow that up, Randy, with this is, I remember the day I realized what you're talking about. I played up until very competitively until about 22, 23, and then I got into coaching immediately. And I remember, I've never told this story before. We had a good team. I was a head coach at 22. I was super proud of myself, but I very much identified through hockey. And I remember being on the bus home from away games I put my hoodie over my head. Everybody thought I was sleeping, and I was crying every night because I wasn't playing anymore. And don't get me wrong, when you stop playing, it's always hard. There's stuff that happens, but I didn't want the players to see me crying. But I remember thinking how painful that was. And having this thought of, why won't hockey do this for me? Or why won't hockey do that for me? And in that thought process, I came to this conclusion of, hockey is not a real person or a real thing. It's a game. It doesn't owe you anything. And from that thought birthed this whole, I am not hockey and hockey is not me. I'm me. And it's a game that I play. And from that point on, I had a completely different path. And what spawned from that, Randy, and I think this is very similar to what you've accomplished and really championed in your post career, was that man, I can apply my hard work ethic to other things, which it almost sounds silly when you say it like that, but I had never thought about it. I identified through hockey so much that the only place hard work and love and dedication could go was into that sport. And same thing with relationships and how I speak to people and how I interact with people. And the whole world opened up to me again. So I think you're right about young athletes. I think there's also a fear in young athletes that if they don't identify, I'm using quotations, with the game, then they're not going to be competitive enough. And I don't believe that to be true. You know, one athlete I'm going to bring up, and actually, JB, this will lead into your next question. He got so much hate, and I never understood it, was Tim Tebow, right? A faith-based athlete who put his family and his faith first ahead of the sport, right? By the way, accomplished more than most people on the planet in now multiple sports. And he got so much hate for that. And I think that is part of the stigma, that here's a guy who really didn't put his sports first, but still accomplished. And people said, well, if he didn't do all that faith stuff, he would have made it. I don't believe that for a second. I think it's the other way around. If he didn't do the faith stuff, he never would have got as far as he did. Right. So it can be done. And he is one of many examples of athletes who do have a grip on faith, family, life outside of a sport. Right. So I just wanted to comment on that because it is part of the journey. Again, that you should not, I'm just going to say this as a statement. You should not identify through a sport. You should identify kind of with who you are and maybe the things that are important in your life. JB, I'm going to throw it to you because I'm going to take your question if I don't. So I want to toss it to you right now.
No, it's okay. Yeah, go ahead, Randy. You can speak
No, I
about
was just
that.
going to thank you for making that statement. You know,
No, it's true. Again, I was older when I realized this in terms of athletics, but you know, I just don't understand the stigma surrounding that, of that, you know, if you don't put every ounce of every mental thought you have into the sport, you're not going to succeed. That's complete BS.
Well, that's the issue that goes on with both coaches and players and staff and everything else. And Randy, you know, if you were a player and you like thought about something else, like, you know what, maybe I want to open up a restaurant someday or something. And if you said that, you know, they were like, what, you're not focused on football? And we had the same thing in the hockey locker room. You know, we had our team captain was like, you know what, when I'm done playing, I'm going to own a restaurant and a fishing charter business. My wife's going to be a chef. And, you know, people were walking around like, what? They couldn't say too much to him because he already won 2 Stanley Cups with another team. He was pretty senior, but there's still a lot of young players. And so, you know, you look at like the NBA, you know, they try to inspire the players to, you know, build their next career now. And again, there needs to be a happy balance there. But I think what happens is when you take away that creativity and that curiosity of these young players, they lose that sense of identity of who they really are. And they try to have to walk past. So we need to continue as coaches and leaders in the organizations. We need to continue to inspire that, to inspire, hey, you know what, Team Tebow, you do hard on your faith. Good for you. Hey, Randy Grimes, you know, you want to be a film producer when you're done playing. Good for you. You know, we should inspire that. And so just take us through that thought process. It's changing a bit now. Your importance of faith, you know, both Lee and I are big in faith as well too. But how's that played a role with you, especially during, you know, your battle with addiction and coming back?
Yeah, and it was such a big part of my home growing up. Like I said, you know, football wasn't religion, but it was a close second. You know, religion was religion, and that was the most important thing back then. I was raised in church, and that was a huge part of my process. It was a huge part of why I chose Baylor University. You know, I wanted to be around that atmosphere and in that setting. You know, I married a preacher's daughter, which was probably that's probably where my first mistake was. But, you know, we met the very first day at Baylor University, our freshman year, and we got married after our junior year. She was the daughter of a Baptist preacher. And, you know, that was important to me. You know, it was important to me that I keep that part of my life first. And, you know, even in the pros, you know, that was so important to so many of the guys that I played with, even back in the 80s and early 90s. You know, we always had big chapels. We had great We had great leaders there, and just a huge part of the whole process. And the good thing about having that, even though I was going through what I was going through, and even though it lasted for as long as I did, I never felt that God wasn't present with me, and it was almost, and it was because of that faith that later I realized that God had allowed me to go through everything that I went through, to have the experiences that I did, so that I would be able to do what I do today. It seems like all that insanity and that madness and that chaos that was going on even back when I played, and then for the next 20 plus years after I retired, was for a reason. And it was to be able to do what I do now and to reach the guys that I reach now. And, that it was eye-opening to me, because this is real life and death stuff. I thought back when I played for the Bucs and I was trying to support my family and I wanted to be the best NFL center that ever played the game, I thought that was the most important thing. But it wasn't. It was only preparing me for what I do now. And it's all because of my faith that I was able to come to that conclusion and be as grateful that I am. I pray every day that God keeps me humble and broken and grateful and surrendered and all those things, because that's what I have to be now to be the man that I'm supposed to be now. So thanks for asking that.
That's a beautiful statement. I love it.
Yeah. And I'll follow up on that too, Randy. Look, depending on really where you live, sometimes the faith conversation is very comfortable for people. Sometimes it's very uncomfortable for people, right? And one of the things that I always say to athletes is that, look, you can choose whatever you want faith to be, but you have to have faith in something, whether it's a higher power, whether it's your family, whether it's teammates, something, right? I can't imagine pursuing life, much less sports, faithless, right? And that's just something I wanted to say, because we've talked about this with other guests too, JB, that, faith is such an important part of life. And that you have to look into finding some version of that, of believing in something larger than yourself. Again, it manifests itself in many different ways. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you.
Randy, you talked a little bit about it. It wasn't on the questions we have, but I think it's so important now, especially in sports, especially football, now hockey, the military, is this TBI, this traumatic brain injury. I'll just tell you a quick story. We were in training, and I had a mine went off. It was like 8 feet from me, because at night we got set in. I was too close to it. And I remember and I was fine. I just got hit with dirt and debris and everything else. But I remember for like a month, I couldn't think straight. The next morning at physical fitness training, I was in the Ranger Regiment. I'm throwing up, and everybody's like, what, did you drink too much last night? I'm like, no, I didn't drink a thing. And we didn't know anything about this, how to treat our brain. And now it's like, oh, lay in a dark room, which is like the worst part. And I think it's so important that, we understand as athletes and as humans, you're going to get whacked every once in a while at the head area, but you need to do the right steps to take care of it and prepare yourself, repair yourself. Maybe you can just expand on that a bit.
Yeah. I've had at least 20 documented concussions in my career, and that's going all the way back to high school. I've actually traced down pretty much every one of them. And I can remember one time taking a knee to the head in the Silver Dome up in Detroit and walking off the field and sitting on their bench, and their doctor sending me back in the game. So I think we've come a long way as far as protocols and the advancements that we've made. But, it exists. TBI, CTE, that stuff exists. It's real. I have to be careful in the populations that I work with to not allow them to blame everything on that. Their behaviors and self-medication and the different things that they go through and the families go through. And the families are quick to blame everything on CTE when really, it's, anxiety, depression, loss of self-worth issues, self-esteem, things that we talked about earlier when we don't have that uniform to put on anymore. So, I'm certainly no neurologist or anything, but I have to be careful to hold these guys accountable. I'm talking about the former players that I work with from all sports, hold them accountable for what they're going through. And let's remove this piece of it, which is the substance abuse disorder and the mental illness. Let's get that in check. Let's see what we have to do there first. And then we can address the different things that are going on in relation to TBI or CTE. And that's not just athletes, that's former military guys or first responders or people like that identify with that kind of with a uniform.
Yeah, exactly. It's, you can even fall at the gym and whack your head going through some of these things. But I think you're exactly right. There is a point there where you have to take this personal responsibility for yourself. You just can't blame it on, oh, well, I did this, so this is why I'm acting like this. No, you're acting like this because you're not putting yourself together. And there's that, we talk about on this show all the time. And Lee and I talk about it privately is, it's this, physical assessment, mental assessment, emotional assessment, spiritual assessment. Like you have to put that all together every single day. And if you avoid one of those areas, then you usually get off balance a bit.
Right.
And that's where you need somebody to maybe pull you back in and say, hey, what's going on with you? And that's where, people like Lee and I are important for teams because, we see a lot what the coaches and staff are missing. When that young man comes in, he's wearing the same clothes that he wore the night before. Hey, what's going on with you? You okay? And just, and it might not be even an alcohol problem. It might be hey, I can't sleep, or, I have all this other issues going on. I'm worried about being cut. I'm worried about being sent down. They just drafted a guy in my next position. You said it, Randy, there was always 2 or 3 guys behind you. So every single day you were showing up regardless if you wanted to or not.
Right. And, like I said, I think that the NFL, I think other major sports leagues have come a long way as far as addressing mental health. I know the NFL has made it made a mental health professional available in every locker room for so many hours during the week. I know to some degree MLB's done the same thing. But here's the problem. Nobody wants to go knock on that door.
100%.
Nobody wants to be seen standing outside waiting to get in to see that professional. Nobody wants to eat lunch with that professional because of the stigma and everything else that surrounds mental health. So, that's kind of what the birth of my nonprofit was all about, was to be that bridge between a player and resources. And that's, there was nothing like that available 12 years ago when I got sober. There was nothing out there for former players from the NFL, because I was originally only thinking about my brothers that I played with and against, and guys that I knew were out there struggling like I was. And that was self-medicating, the injuries they got when they played in the league, and the other mental health issues that we talked about. So that was all I wanted to accomplish, was to be that bridge between the player and resources. And man, it was so successful. There were so many guys that once they realized, because I can remember having these same feelings, that I was out there alone, struggling. Nobody else was as bad as I was. I was too ashamed to raise my hand because, here I was, this athlete that had reached the pinnacle of my sport. And now I'm laying in the floor of a vacant house with no utilities, no job, no car, no money, all as a result of addiction. And so, yeah, there was a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of pride and ego that kept me from raising my hand. And that's the stigma that I'm trying to tear down now. It's not just about, hey, substance abuse or addiction or mental health issues is bad. It's not just that. It's that let's get over that pride and ego, and let's realize that this happens to everybody. This happens to your pastor, to your pilot, to your local judge, your parents, somebody in your family. This stuff happens to everybody, and it can affect anybody.
Exactly.
Randy, I'll follow up because, we're on the same mission here. I'm totally with you with this, especially about, studying ego and the stigma. The stigma is still very alive today. And I always tell people, if you want to know how alive it is, you can ask yourself questions such as, how did you react to Simone Biles deciding not to compete in the Olympics this year? A lot of people showed that this stigma is still alive and well. For a woman who has done nothing less than champion our country at the Olympic level multiple times, has dealt with sexual addiction on a level never seen before, she owes us nothing. But when she says, I need to take a break for my mental health, she's ridiculed, told she's a quitter.
She let her team down.
Yeah, let her country down. I was blown away by that. I was blown away. Listen, I was disappointed that she wasn't going to compete because I like to watch her compete. But that's about where that ended. The things I read, I was blown away by it. And if anything, Randy, and this is how I work, and JB, you know this too. It's like, don't tell me what I can't do kind of thing. I saw that. I'm like, I'm tripling down on my mission now. This is ridiculous. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you a couple quick hockey stories. JB, you'll love this one. I remember, because in hockey, like you said, when I was growing up, a concussion was a day-to-day injury. We didn't know what it was. It was something you got up and you kept playing in the same game if you could. One of the greatest of all time, Sidney Crosby. Now, just to preface this for everybody, I grew up in Philadelphia. Okay, so Sidney Crosby plays for Pittsburgh. You don't grow up liking Pittsburgh, any Pittsburgh sports teams, but you're from Philadelphia. So, I had my kind of like my fandom back then. And I remember he got a massive concussion in the Winter Classic, and he sat out for over a year. And I remember this is when I started to change my tune, because he had a major head injury. And I realized about halfway through, because everyone was calling him a wimp and that this is stupid, get back out there. And I realized about halfway through that year off, I said, this guy's changing the game for his athletes. And nobody really picked up on it until, because, CTE started coming out of the NFL. I realized that this guy's taking a stand for all his athletes, not just his own career, because he is one of the greatest of all time. But he's saying, no, I'm not playing through this. It's going to shorten my career, potentially shorten my life. And you know what's funny? When in hockey now, and again, every sport kind of goes through their own version of this. And JB, again, you can speak to this. In hockey now, a concussion's taken very, very seriously. I think it's because of his the guts he had to sit out the year as one of the highest paid players, as the best player at the time. The guts he had to say, no, this is my brain. I'm putting my body first. Completely normalize that part of the conversation of when you get a concussion, you sit out and you reassess and reassess and reassess. Right. I look back on that now and I'm like, you talk about the greats of any sport. There's another person that is going beyond just his ability to play and making, the game better, the world better, just like you're doing. The other story I wanted to tell real quick, you just made me think about this, about, kind of old school coaches, new school coaches, and the work that JB and I do. I had this really wonderful experience of working with a team in England where the head coach was Russian, the assistant coach was Russian, and these are guys who grew up in the Soviet Union. I'm an American coaching British hockey players. So it's just a very weird situation, right? And look, if you grew up in Russia in the late 70s, early 80s in America, it's an interesting time period, just to say the least. And I'll always give this guy's name Slava. I'll always give him credit because I was in an interview with him and I told him I'm a team builder and this is what I do. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm going to get this or not. He's a hard coach. And he said to me, and looked me right in the eye and he goes, listen, I'm not going to do a Russian accent, but he said, listen, I don't know how to do what you do, but I know I need it. Right. And he used to call me an American experiment all the time. And we ended up winning a championship that year as a team. And I'll never forget, we had this moment after the game where it was just, we didn't say anything, but we just kind of knew, like, we worked together on this and that he understood that his players needed an emotional leader in the locker room and someone they could talk to. He understood that was important to winning. And maybe more importantly, that he couldn't do it. Right. And again, we're starting to see an awakening of that now. I mean, athletes are speaking out more than ever before. Obviously, I mentioned Simone Biles. We're seeing this in tennis. We're seeing this in across the board of athletes are really not afraid anymore to speak about, look, my mental health matters. And this is what I want the athletes listening. It's important to me succeeding. right? That's another part of the stigma that needs to be broken. You're not going to become a worse player because you care about yourself. You can keep your competitive edge while also maintaining a mental edge. And again, rounding this out, I'm talking a lot. I apologize. I'm obviously very motivated about these topics. Okay. One of the things I've stopped doing, and this is just me. Okay. There's no problem with anybody who does it. I've stopped saying mental health and I've replaced it with mental fitness. And the reason why is because I'm finding that people have a much easier time understanding you work on your physical fitness. You also need to work on your mental fitness. They need to be on equal playing fields. Right. And so when I talk about mental fitness, I start thinking about that of what are we doing? Are we doing enough? And I think the split's really 90-10 right now towards physical fitness, right? Those two need to coexist all the time. You have to understand that one is just as important as the other. So Randy, this is leading to a question. I apologize. My question to you is, when we look at mental fitness, how do you define it? How do you practice it today? All right. I'm sure the work you do is a form of not just therapy, but empowerment, right? And how important is mental fitness to really not just athletes, but the world in general?
Well, I mean, we know how important it is to athletes. That involves our daily lives, and like you said, it's something we have to work on every day. And I think we have, as a society, come a lot further than we were, and even a decade ago. As far as allowing people the platform to talk about their issues. Obviously, in sports, the different protocols that have been set in place for concussions has helped a lot of guys. But I think about some of these young kids who are retiring from the NFL after 2-3 years in the league, guys that still have a good decade left in them, but right. They're putting their mental fitness, above everything else, and really, you're not putting your mental fitness above your sport. The way I look at it is you're putting your family or your future family or your own health above the sport. And that, I think, is where that's where we've finally gotten through all this, where we're not allowing the sport to become who we are anymore. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about our families. We're thinking about the next 40 years, 50 years that we're going to be on this earth, where we're not going to have a uniform to put on anymore. So I wish it would start earlier. I know when I speak a lot about substance use disorder and mental health issues with young people, I often think, man, I wish we had some kind of an assessment that we could do on kids as they're leaving high school and preparing for the next phase of their life. And because, if we could catch things that much earlier, it would be so much better and start addressing them. I talk a lot about transitioning, and when I didn't have the sport anymore, and transitioning means so many different things. It means broken homes, divorces, kids graduating from college and can't find a job. It's that CEO or that executive that retires and all of a sudden doesn't have that office anymore to go through. It's that military guy who can't put on that uniform. We as Americans don't transition well. And a lot of times, it causes mental health issues. And the first thing we do is self-medicate. I think we've come a long way. And I think it's advocates like you guys and the things that we do that have brought us there, but we still have so much further to go.
No, and it's going to get to the place, and Lee talked about this, and Randy, where we're not even calling it mental fitness or physical fitness, or it's just fitness, right? That's where we want to get to, fitness. And I think there's a couple things you talked about. I just spoke to Marcus Smith II a few weeks ago. He played linebacker, first round pick, played linebacker for the Eagles, did a 6-year career. And he was like, you know what? Enough is enough, and still had many good years left in him. And now he's doing his own thing and building his own entrepreneurship. Because I think you're right. There is some points of this. It's just so much, and you can only take so much. I mean, a lot of people leave the military. They have a great career, 4, 5, 6 years. They leave the military where really they just need like 2 months off. And I would just say, okay, I've had enough. And I'd be like, can we just give the guy 2 months off and then ask him again? It'd probably be okay, or should be okay. But it's just so much that
Right.
you just can't take that. And I think sometimes we need to continue that. And the other thing is, Randy, Big Pharma has made this use of opioids so easy now. I know me, and I don't do it. I could go to the VA and go, oh, my elbow still hurts. Here, we'll give you this to take. And I'm like, I'm not taking those. But it's this medication, and it becomes crazy because Big Pharma is running it. And if you're if you're an elected official, you need to get rid of that. But the question I wanted to ask you, Randy, is, and you've been amazing. I love everything you say. So, let's just, you're not going to change what you did. I love it. This is what you were born to do. I love it. And I love the fact that you said the game doesn't define you. It's something you did. It was the journey to success. And again, it took some twists and turns, but you made the right choices for yourself. So if you had to send a text to your younger self, the 21-year-old Randy Grimes, graduating from college, married, getting ready to lace it up for the Bucks
in the Hall of Fame, looking at yourself with that picture.
That's right. And listen, that picture was Randy White. So come on, Randy. Right. So, so send a text to your younger self. What's it going to say?
It would probably say, don't be misled the fact that the Bucks went to the playoffs in '82, because they're not going to go to the playoffs again for another 3 decades. And the next thing would be, don't let the uniform define you. Don't let the sport define who you are. Focus on your family. I can remember how excited, like I said, I got married after my junior year. I got drafted my senior year. And I was so excited to be going to the seaside community of Tampa, Florida, because, like I said, well, first of all, I'd never even seen the ocean. I was an East Texas kid. And also, the Bucks had just gone to the playoffs in '82, the strike-shortened year. So I was going to a playoff contender, and so we were so excited to be going there and starting our family and our lives together. And my career in pro football, I can remember hooking up that U-Haul trailer to our burgundy Cutlass Supreme with the vinyl roof and all, and heading out I-10 East, but. Everything was for a reason. Everything was God's perfect plan and by design. And I had a great career, even though all that other stuff was going on, the substance abuse disorder, and I was doing whatever I had to do to stay out on the field. So I thought then. Even though all that was going on, I had a great career. And even today, I don't blame the NFL for what happened to me as far as my addiction. I'm Randy Grimes. I'm a man. I'm responsible for everything I put in my mouth. And so I even today, I'm careful not to blame them for it or blame the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah, they made it available. That was the culture back then. But, I have to be accountable. And, a note to myself back then would just don't allow the sport to become who I am. And that's what I'm most guilty of.
Randy, because we're all armchair GMs and team presidents and owners. And I'm interested here, this is off topic, but what do you think, what would, if you owned the Bucks back then, or you were the GM, because again, you had decades of not making the playoffs. What do you think happened there? Did not the right culture, changing too many people over?
Yeah, what's your thoughts? There was no consistency back then.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't have 5 coaches in 10 years and think that you're ever going to get any consistent. I mean, once I learned one playbook, somebody else would bring in another one, from another coaching staff and a whole new system. Even as dumb as I was back in my 20s, I was smart enough to realize that the Bucks needed to change everything. We needed to change our locker room, our logo, our pencils, our letterhead. We were snake bit. And a lot of that was because I think Culver House was more interested in just making money than he was going to the Super Bowl. You know, and the profit sharing was coming in back then, and everybody was working together, and everybody was making good money, no matter what your record was. And I just think that the emphasis was on, making money and not producing a good team. There was plenty of good talent. I mean, I looked around. We had some really horrible drafts, and I can remember, like 1988, 89, even 90, looking around at the team at all the former first round picks that we had that weren't playing, and that's not a way to build a team. Your first round picks from every draft
got to play
out there contributing. They should be like future Pro Bowlers, and that wasn't the case with us. We had some really horrible drafts. We picked some really bad people who never really produced. We had quarterback issues for a long time after Doug left. We went through a lot until Vinny came in. And even when Vinny came in, I don't think he got the coaching that he needed to go to that next level. I mean, Vinny was a great quarterback. Testaverde he had all the talent in the world, the ability, and it just never shined through at Tampa because he never had the right coaching. Guy went on and had 18, 19-year career.
Sure.
We don't talk enough about that, but that guy, he stayed around forever because he was such a talented athlete. And so there was a lot of things. The crazy thing is Culver House's daughter, Gay Culver House, became one of my best friends after I got sober because she was already out there helping former players. She knew it was important to help the guys that played for her, and she made a huge impact until she recently passed away about 6 or 7 months ago. But I got to work with her. I got to see her away from One Buck Place. And she was just such a beautiful person, and she cared a lot about her players, and she helped a lot of her former players.
That's wonderful. A long time a sports executive once told me, and I never forgot this. He was like talking about, when you're bringing people in, for your staff and coaches, and he always said, patient with your hiring and patient with your firing. So I think, you look at teams that have tried to do it, they try to keep some type of consistency,
right,
and through that build that culture. So
and
back to you, Lee.
Be building on that, and this is funny, Randy. I mean, you look at what you just said about the Bucks of the 80s and look at the Bucks today. And they have completely done what you're saying, right? Obviously they have a very capable quarterback, and that's what everybody focuses on. But you know what I remember about Tom Brady being signed there? I remember, and again, I can't tell you if this was him or not. I have a feeling it was. I remember within weeks of him being signed, the jersey was changed immediately. That this is now a new era in Tampa Bay. And then I remember he started bringing in other athletes, and there's a clear culture now. He brought in that culture of winning, right? And then he brought in athletes that could do it. I've always been amazed, and this is one of those things we don't talk about enough. And again, I can't say it's only Tom Brady, but I'm amazed at how many troubled athletes end up playing on a team that he's on, and they become very even-keeled and quiet, and they participate and they do their job. That's a championship culture. Right?
Antonio Brown, because he told him that. Because because he told him, he's like, Antonio, you're going to get your bonus. Right. I'm going to make sure. But guess what? If you disrupt the culture, you're out.
Gone. Right.
But you're out. But it takes somebody of that stature and authority to do that. And that's when we talk about the chemistry inside the locker room. They're responsible for it.
Yeah. Randy Moss, who's, I mean, again, not the same level here, but in terms of troubles off the field, I think. But I think that's so important when you're talking about, Randy, is that culture and championship culture. And again, something that maybe we'll have you back on another episode to talk about.
Well,
something I love.
And when they first signed him, I didn't know how much he was going to bring to the table as far as ability, with age and arm strength and all he has to have. But I knew that he was going to bring what you just talked about, that championship culture to the huddle, to that young team, to the locker room. And let me tell you, as an offensive lineman in the pros, you want to go back to a huddle that's being run by a quarterback like that, that's been there, that knows what to do, knows how to handle not only himself, but the team, the clock, the coaches, the game. That's what you want. You want somebody in charge, because as a center, I've got so many blocking schemes. I've got so many different things going on that I have to be responsible for. I want somebody who's cool, calm, and collected. And that's what Tom Brady brings to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think he's more, as great as he is on the field, and we all know he's great, I think his greatest value is in that locker room.
Right.
And he brings that attitude, and that it's just that air about him, that this guy is a winner.
Right. And you know what? Here's the thing. Everybody likes to look at his resume, which is obviously the greatest of all time. He's had 2 Hall of Fame careers. But the truth is this: if you study that man, if you study him, he's been like that since the day he came in the league. To have the cojones to go up to your owner and say, I'm going to win you a Super Bowl when you're whatever round pick he was. I mean, like, that's a guy who knew that from the start. The resume obviously helps. Now it's just undisputable.
And
right?
Belichick keeping him on the roster as the 4th quarterback
Right.
when he was a rookie.
Right.
Which doesn't happen because Belichick saw something in him. And Belichick is as crazy as he is, because he's probably crazy. He saw something in him, not to cut him, because he would have got picked up by somebody else. So kept him on the team. Back then, 52-man roster, burned a roster spot for a fourth quarterback.
Right.
Crazy like a fox, huh?
Crazy like a fox.
They also have crazy Super Bowls together and now apart from each other. So we'll see how that goes. So look, Randy, before we go, I want you to have some time here to talk about pro athletes in recovery. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't give you the ability to at least explain what that organization is, what it stands for, and how people can get involved.
Well, and like I said, 12 years ago, there wasn't resources out there for former professional athletes, and I knew there was a lot of guys out there just like me that were struggling. So, I formed the nonprofit to be a bridge between players and resources. I had no idea that everybody else would get involved with it too. It was originally just kind of an NFL project. Next thing I know, Major League Baseball assistance team, motorsport safety group, MMA, pretty much every sport out there that has an organization that supports former players. When you talk about current athletes, everybody's got their own protocols and stuff. So I don't get involved with that. I really just kind of focus on the former players from all sports. And, that's where my interest is. But let me make clear that it doesn't just stop there. I work with everybody, anybody seeking help from this horrible disease that is addiction, and the mental health issues. I love working with families. I believe when families get well, addicts get well. I believe when communities get well, addicts get well. So I think it's important that we continue this education process and educating people on the disease of addiction and the different mental health issues that are out there. So that's what it's all about. I've had a lot of athletes, a lot of former athletes come through the program. The work that I do at White Sands Treatment Center here in Tampa is important because that's where all the magic happens. I bring them in through my nonprofit, and then the magic happens in the course of 30 or 60 days worth of inpatient treatment. So I'm grateful for White Sands that they allow me to do that there, that we have such great therapists. And, we all have nagging injuries. We all have chronic pain. But I try to teach guys that there's non-narcotic ways to deal with your pain. And, the crazy thing about it is here I was medicating all these years, these 20 plus years. And a lot of the injuries that I thought I was medicating, once I got off all the opiates for about 5, 6, 7 months, they went away. It was like stuff that I had manifested in my brain. Yeah, I had a knee replaced. I had the other knee operated on. I had some neck surgery. I took some steps to get out of the chronic pain that I was in, that I was self-medicating, but there was a lot of other issues that I had that just went away. So, I had to do a lot of work on myself in treatment. And the biggest thing that I did, there was all these underlying issues and stuff that made me do what I did. But the main thing that I finally did as a result of treatment was I finally grieved the death of Randy Grimes, the football player. And I moved on, which is something that I hadn't done even though I'd been out of the game for 20 years, I was still holding on to that, and I never really let that go and grieved it, and moved on with my life and reinvented myself and became this new person. And the recovery process helped me do that. People ask me what I miss most about football, and it's not being out on that field around the cheerleaders and the people in the stands and under the lights and in between the bleachers and all that, the game and all that. It's not that. I miss the locker room the most. I miss sitting around with the guys. I miss being with people that have bled with me and cried with me and suffered with me and laughed with me. I miss being with people that have been to those places that I've been, dark places, that sports takes us in, and the happy places too. But that's what recovery gave me back, as another locker room, to be with like-minded people who have been to the same dark places that I've been because of addiction. And that's what I'm so grateful for. And that's kind of the whole point of Athletes in Recovery, is to give guys that locker room again, to give them a place to go and share and be with like-minded people that have been to where they've been and suffered like they've suffered through this. And, we've got a lot more work to do, and I'm here to do it,
Randy, you're an incredible human being. And I get to be honest with you, this was one of my favorite episodes of the show that we've done so far. And
Good.
If you've listened to this point, make sure you please look this man up, Randy Grimes. You can look him up on Google and find a plethora of things about him and listen to his story, listen to his message, become an ally of his cause, because he is changing the way things are done for the better. There's a deep care about people here, Randy, that's obvious. That you believe in people, something we need a little bit more of right now. But I want to thank you for being here today, because you were an awesome guest.
You were great, Randy. You're great. And I just want to say, I love what you said about when the families get healed, the addict gets healed. Like, that was amazing. And I'll just add, the big thing about military, we have hundreds of military soldiers that kill themselves every month. And people ask me all the time, do you miss the military? I'm like, no, do I miss combat? But you miss the bubbas, you miss the team room. And that's that same thing. So there are resources out there. I love what you're doing. Get some help. It's not, it's, you don't have to tough it up, suck it up, buttercup. We're not doing that. Let's go. Ask for help. I love it. Thank you, Randy.
Thanks for having me. And hey, you can find me at the website is proathletesinrecovery.org or whitesandstreatment.com. Also, Randy Grimes Speaks. Of course, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, all of that. Sober Center 60. And you can always find me. But listen, I'm available for everybody. And, I want to do my part. And like I said, I pray every day that God keeps me humble and broken, grateful and surrendered. And if we've got time, I got one quick story about that. Because when I got to treatment that night, September 22nd, 2009, I fell out of that old black, dirty, beat up town car that picked me up and took me to West Palm Beach. And I crawled. The door was about another 30 feet away, and I crawled on all fours through that door that night. And I knew that I was in for the fight of my life, and I think I'm a pretty tough guy. I've been in a lot of battles. You don't get to stay in the league for 10 years unless you're winning most of those. But the greatest story I ever heard about that, was I'd gotten to be very good friends with Pat Summerall while I was at Baylor. And, our relationship just blossomed while I was in the pros. And then after I retired and the 20 plus years of addiction, I kind of lost touch with him, but I reunited with him at the 2010 Super Bowl down in Miami. And he told me a story. What you might not know about Pat Summerall is he was a longtime alcoholic, but he was also a guy in long-term recovery. And he told me a story about his neighbor in Dallas, Texas, who his neighbor was had all kinds of failing organ issues, and he was on his third marriage, and his new wife was his new drinking buddy, and he couldn't stop drinking. And Pat felt like he needed to do something for his neighbor. So he got some guys together and they went next door. This is in Dallas, and they did a little intervention on him. And 90 days later, when Mickey Mantle walked out of the Betty Ford Clinic, there was a crowd of people, and this was back in the early 80s, like 82, 83. There was a crowd of people waiting for him there. And he could have gone out the back door because there was a car waiting for him. But he had something that he wanted to say to this crowd. And as he approached them out under the portico there, somebody hollered out, "Mickey, what do you most want to be remembered for?" And everybody was expecting some baseball related answer, you know. But Mickey said, "I want people to realize that my greatest accomplishment in life was getting clean and sober." And that's how I felt that night when I crawled through the door, you know. That was my greatest accomplishment even over my marriage or the birth of my children or all the football accolades. Crawling in the door that night was my greatest accomplishment, because if I don't do that, then everything else was for nothing. And then I'm just another statistic.
It's an incredible story, man.
Beautiful.
I appreciate you sharing it too.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, man. And look, I can't imagine another way to end this show, so I'm just going to do it. That's going to do it for this episode of Win Championship Traits for Life, which is powered by Pivotal Moments. And you can learn more about our guest today, Randy Grimes, at proathletesinrecovery.org, as he said, or whitesandstreatment.com, wstreatment.com. And you can learn more about our organization, Pivotal Moments, and our channel Grit at pivotalmoments.org. We've got a ton of inspirational content, just like this episode. Entertaining content, and also, most importantly, educational content. We're here to serve you, right? So for Randy Grimes and JB Spizo, I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us, and make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes of Win soon, wherever podcasts can be heard. Have a great day, everybody.